what's up? Welcome to another episode of Wassup Conversations, a podcast with inspiring artists and storytellers. I'm your host, Hamid Reza Nikofar, and in this episode, I have a very talented creative director as my guest. He's the creative director of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, Destroy All Humans, Path of the Furin, lead designer of Scribblenauts, and the guy behind the awesome bosses in Borderlands 3. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Matt Cox, creative director at Gearbox Software. In our conversation, Matt and I talked about comedy in video games, Gearbox's awesome looting system, designing bosses, his background, and how he got into the video game industry. To learn more about Wassup Conversations, please visit nikofarmusic.com and keep up with the show from my Twitter account at hrnikofar. Thank you for tuning in. Let's journey to the Wonderlands. Hello and welcome to Wassup Conversations, Matt. So glad to have you here, and I hope you're doing a great day. Having a great day.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing. I've had a great year for sure.
Yeah, a little something out in the market. So, it's so awesome to have you on the podcast. I love your work and generally your personality. I've been following you on Twitter for a while, and I really wanted to have you on the podcast to talk about your success story, life, something that we both love, your video games. So, So speaking of games, what games have you been playing recently?
Oh my gosh. So I am one of those people that, well, right now, I used to play probably a few games for like hundreds and hundreds of hours, but now I feel like I play 100 games for just a few hours at a time. I love playing a lot of different things. I'm playing a little bit of Children of Morta. I'm playing, The Quarry just came out. I'm playing a little bit of The Quarry. That's tremendous. I'm going back and I play Mario Odyssey and Mario Kart 8 in our house. Like, we are huge Mario fans in our house. And so I kid you not, put probably a couple thousand hours into Mario Odyssey, which is a weird thing to say because Mario Odyssey is probably like a 12-hour game. But there's something about that just core gameplay loop that I love and my family loves. And so, getting older, I tend to play more games, which my whole family can play.
Yeah, so the kids are not old enough to play Wonderlands, right?
No. So with Wonderlands, it's funny. It's like, so they've watched me play Wonderlands because my two girls are 8 and 11. And so, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was a teen-rated game. It was different from a Borderlands game, which was, M-rated. And so, one of the biggest reasons we did that was to kind of expand our audience, and maybe there will be, new fans out there that maybe their parents didn't let them play an M-rated shooter, but still experience our core like looter shooter loop in a whole fantasy setting. So I've actually let my kids watch me play some Wonderlands, and we've heard a lot of stories of the same sort of thing where parents are experiencing, Wonderlands with their kids, which it means the world to us.
Yeah, so is Tiny Tina a good role model for a girl?
Well, Tiny Tina, you know what? Like, Tiny Tina is, she has such a chaotic mind. And so I think we can find a lot of ourselves in Tiny Tina. Like, she reminds me of just the crazy, chaotic nature in me when I was a kid, and particularly my 8-year-old Lorelai reminds me a lot of how I was when I was a kid, just constantly her mind going every which way.
Yeah. I remember this section of the game when Tiny Tina is dreaming about a C4, and someone said there's no C4 in this time. Instead, okay, it's a fantasy 4. Yeah, so it's her mind is always working to figuring out things.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that was one of the fun things in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands that we got to design for, and our writers got to write for, and everybody got to develop for, is since Tiny Tina can just change things immediately, like, we got to design some really crazy things, which was really fun.
Great. So let's go back to your childhood. So kind of followed your path to becoming the creative director of one of the most successful franchises in the history of video games, of which I'm talking about Borderlands for those who don't know. And your work on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So tell me about your journey up to this point.
It's really fun. It's funny because like I didn't go to school for video games at all, but you know what? The first the first sign of me wanting to be a video game designer, honestly, was when Zelda 1 came out on the original Nintendo, like the NES. So I played the first quest and the second quest of the original Zelda. And so I took construction paper. I couldn't have been, more than 7 to 8 years old. And the whole overworld map in the original Zelda is made up of tiles, right? You go from this side to that side. And so I took a piece of construction paper for every tile and set it out on the floor. And I just redrew the entire map and changed where dungeons were and items were. And I took all of these pieces of construction paper and sent them to Nintendo. Like I found Nintendo's address and I sent them to them saying, hey, here's a third quest for Zelda 1, thinking like, oh, they're going to use it. But what's really heartwarming about that is that Nintendo actually, they sent it back, but they sent it back with a bunch of like Mario stickers and Zelda stickers saying it's like, oh my gosh, like keep this up, like keep this in mind and like keep working at being a video game designer. Like it was very encouraging and it kind of meant the world. So that was like the first time in my life. That was, the late 1980s. I'm really making myself sound old here. That I thought I could do it, but I went through school. And I went to college, and it didn't really occur to me that I could go to video game school. Like there was Full Sail was one of the schools where you could go to, and I actually wanted to learn audio production. I wanted to learn how to be an audio producer, like produce music, because music's a huge part of my life. But it was too expensive. So I went into in-state school in Kansas, went to the University of Kansas, and I decided to get a journalism degree. So that's what I did in college. Like I got a degree in journalism, and right out of school, I worked for a newspaper. It like wasn't my dream job. But the thing is, like, when you get a job, for me, that's not a very inspiring thing. I loved Halo. Around the same time Halo came out for the original Xbox, and it kind of blew my mind. Like it was one of the coolest, one of the best shooters, obviously on console. Like that is not up for argument. But like the music, Marty O'Donnell's score, the sense of mystery, like a lot of, and the multiplayer, the original multiplayer, where I would bring my Xbox and 27-inch tube TV that weighed like 200 pounds over to a friend's house, and like we would link it up through LAN and play these like 16-player multiplayer matches in our same apartment. Like those were amazing days. So I kind of fell in love with Halo, and then Gearbox, for those who don't know, actually worked on the PC version of Halo, and Gearbox was the one to release editing kits and the ability to be able to create your own levels and spawn all the Halo stuff on a level and like create your own multiplayer maps. And so here I am, just graduated college. I'm not very inspired by my job. I got involved with the Gearbox's community online that were starting to make these Halo multiplayer maps. And so I learned just on my own and through the community, really with the help of the community, the online community, how to make levels and how to, do basic 3D art. But my heart was in design. Like, what do you do when you're there? But the first time that I spawned Master Chief on just bad art that I made in 3ds Max, it was eye-opening. And so it was from that moment that I realized, you know what? I want to try to make video games for a living, right? Like I want to do it for real. So I kept making more and more multiplayer levels for Halo custom edition, and then eventually I made a portfolio out of it. I made this video with like some of what I thought were my best designs, and I walked through why I made certain levels here, why I put certain cover here, why I made this bend over here, like just rudimentary, just basic stuff. And I applied to like 30 different companies in the Seattle area, because at that time, like, it's like you had to move to Texas or Los Angeles or Seattle, like, as the main hubs of where you want to try to get into the video game industry. And so after my wife graduated school, it's like, okay, are we going to move to Texas, LA, or Seattle? And she says, well, I don't want to move to Texas. And I'm like, well, I don't want to move to LA. And so we went up to Seattle, and that's where it's like 30 studios I applied to. I can't remember, like 5 to 7 emails back. I got 3 interviews out of 30 places applied. And one of them was Bungie. And one of them was THQ. And so Bungie sent me through a bunch of interviews, and it was for a contract writing position. They tried to get me a multiplayer design position, and if they offered me that, I totally would have taken it. But I was offered a contract writing position, but THQ offered me a full game design position, like a full-time game design position out of the gate as my first opportunity. And so as much as I loved Halo and Bungie, I chose THQ because I got to do tons of different things. I got to do mission design. I got to talk about dialogue design, combat design, multiplayer game prototypes. So that was Destroy All Humans: Path of the Furon was my very first game in the industry. And I got to learn so many different lanes of design. And so, that was actually a long story of how I got my first game job. And that was 2006.
That's very inspiring, because many of the people that I talk to on this podcast, when they tell me their story, is there's always this section that they were playing around with modding tools. And it shows how important this is for the industry, for the people who wants to get into the game development. And it's basically the first step. And you can show the company. I mean, for example, you could show your creation to Bungie, and they're like, "Yeah, good map design here."
And I, ever since I got into the industry, I've always had a heart for people in the community just out there making stuff, right? Like, you can go to game school, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the end of the day, even when we have people applying for junior positions, we want to see what they've done. So, and particularly with game schools, like, a lot of times they do the same type of project. And so we're trying to weed through all of these portfolios to see what they specifically did. So no matter if you go to game school or you don't go to game school, one of the biggest things that we always look for, and I always look for, is what are you making? Like, what can you make? And show us what you've made. And so the education part of it, while it can be important, is not initially what I think sticks out and what I look for. Because look at me, I was a journalism degree. That's what I got, a journalism degree. And what is that? Like, it wasn't any game school, but it was the stuff that I made with a community. And I got to display, hey, I worked with a team of people, like, put some things together. And that's also important. So I would always encourage people wanting to get into the game industry, like, show what you can do, and also show that you can work on a team.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had a similar journey. I was a journalist writing about video games, and this company said, "Hey, you seem like criticizing our games pretty good. Why don't you come in here and design some stuff?" And I started designing games, and then I switched to music and audio. So so you got to start from somewhere. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one thing that I really love about Borderlands is the comedy of it. Comedy is not as strong as other genres in games, but the universe of Borderlands and specifically Wonderlands is a laughter fest. I really laugh out loud playing Wonderlands, and it never gets cheesy or out of place. Let's talk about it. What do you think is the successful formula of Borderlands universe that makes the comedy work?
I think just a lot of iteration, like a lot of trial and error. Like, we have an amazing set of writers who are in constant conversation and communication with our mission designers and our designers and what they want to accomplish there. And one of the things that honestly inspired me to work for Gearbox is kind of what you're saying. There's not a lot of AAA comedy out there, right? Like you could play amazing AAA games and they have moments that are funny, right?
Yeah.
But as a core pillar, we try to make you laugh. We want to make you laugh through whatever, we're doing. And so I think part of the success that I've seen, and I've only been with Gearbox since 2017, but a lot of the success that I think we have is because we have a lot of designers and writers that don't have any ego. There's not just like one writer that's like, I'm the joke writer and all my jokes are funny the first time. Like it's none of that. Like it takes a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration to find the funny. And also jokes are good, but like if you don't care about characters, the jokes can tend to fall flat. And so our mission designers come up with the thing that they want to accomplish, and then the writers start working with them to figure out how to best represent the plot moving forward. So I think it's just a lot of collaboration and rewriting until you find the funny.
Yeah, and the voice actors are doing a pretty good job delivering that. And you guys had some A-list voice actors for this game.
Yeah, eventually, yeah. I mean, I was talking with Sam, our lead writer on Wonderlands, and like at some point, like the words are eventually just appear on a page, but it takes a tremendous talent and delivery to really sell the funny among the fun. And so, yeah, Wonderlands was unbelievable, right? Like we had amazing talent for Dragonlord, Fret and Valentine, and of course Ashley Birch reprising her role as Tiny Tina, and then just an entire suite of actors too that may not be like celebrity status, but sometimes they're in the booth, right? And they're reading, they're performing the line, and sometimes they might say something different or like try something different. And again, we have an amazing VO director and writers who let the voice talent, be themselves and like put themselves into the characters. So sometimes lines just appear in the VO booth that weren't even on the page to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, the other day I was playing the game and an enemy saw me and I said, "Oh, what are you, 2 XPs?" That was awesome. So back when Borderlands was released, the world was so much different. Do you feel limited or changed when you're working on a game like Wonderlands in 2022?
Say that one more time. Like, what's different about working on Wonderlands compared to the first Borderlands?
Regarding the comedy and the state of the world that we are living in right now.
Yeah, I think everybody's always learning, right? Everybody's always the state of the world changes. What might have been, considered comedy 12 years ago may not be now. But I think that's one of the things I love about being in this studio and working for Gearbox is that everybody legitimately cares about people and representation and inclusivity and finding humor in current life and in everyday life. So I think, and it's not just Gearbox, I think it's anybody in the industry. Like you've seen we've all grown up as we're also continuing to create games and constantly making something that resonates with people. And so I think, sometimes it's easy just to think that you always have the right idea and you just make the same game over and over and you write the same jokes over and over and over, where I think if we want to entertain the world, we have to be of the world. And I think we do. I love how our writers and our designers really like growing, but also still finding the funny.
Yeah, true. So I'm curious, are there other games that you play and you find it so funny? I mean, to find it an absolute comedy.
I don't know. I don't think I've played anything that has struck me. And again, I haven't played every single video game that's out there right now. But yeah, that's just like, oh, this is hilarious. But it is weird though, because Destroy All Humans I think is one of those franchises from a while ago that did try to write comedy in AAA as well, and is really trying to do send-ups and spoofs of a lot of cultural norms of the 50s, then the 60s, then the 70s. And so I find myself wanting to develop for those types of games. But when I sit down to play, like I'm sitting down to play Elden Ring, or I'm sitting down to play Halo Infinite, like I tend to go for these really epic, a little more serious. But, you know, like I think Uncharted does a fantastic job with comedy. I think the Uncharted series has done wonderful. I wouldn't call it a comedy, but it's definitely more of that adventure. Like it's a sense of just blockbuster adventure. So that's probably the first thing that comes to mind. It's like, oh, there's probably more laughs per shooting encounter in a game like Uncharted, but not in a huge space, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, so you wouldn't see yourself working on a game like Last of Us.
You know, it's Last of Us. I mean, they do fantastic, right? Like Naughty Dog is like one of the best developers in the world, right?
Yeah.
But I do like levity. I do like having moments where we can constantly find the humor and the heart together a lot. And so I'll play a lot. Yeah, I played The Last of Us, but yeah. I really gravitate towards building something with heart and humor.
Yeah, that's great. I'm happy you're doing that because you guys are great at it. Yeah. So
it's like Fall Guys. Like playing Fall Guys is just hilarious because like it's like goofy from the get-go. So while it's not like
not in the narrative.
Comedy, like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not in the narrative, but like
last year, the Guardians of the Galaxy, that was a good game, and that was a very funny game.
That's actually a great one. I played like 4 or 5 hours of Guardians. That's actually a really good point. I'm surprised I didn't think of that. They've done a wonderful job weaving in comedy, constant comedy with narrative. Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah. So aside from comedy, Borderlands games have one of the best looting system out there. For all the game designers listening to this podcast, what tips do you have for designing a looting system as perfect and rewarding as Wonderlands?
Well, I can't take literally any credit for the procedural guns and weapon system that we have in Borderlands. Like I said, I've been working at Gearbox since Borderlands 3 on AI. I started in like AI and NPCs and stuff. But what you're talking about is very true. I still have yet to see such a prolific looting system like Gearbox has created and developed over the years. And I think a big part of that is that when you open a chest, you actually get to see the thing you're picking up. Yeah. Like you get to see that generated gun. You get to see that generated in Wonderlands, like the actual different spell with all the things on it, or the melee weapon with all the different things on it. And sometimes like opening chests, and this isn't a good or bad thing. Like I definitely don't want to come across like this is necessarily a bad thing. But like you open a chest and it's just a bunch of effects, like being sucked into the body, and then you have to go to your menu to figure out what you got. That's fine. And I know why developers do that, because it's way less expensive on memory and a bunch of other development time to do that. Where we like, you know what, we like the idea of when you open up a gift, like opening up a chest should feel like you're opening up a birthday present, right? And you see the thing right there. And so I think that is one of the great things that Gearbox has developed over time, is that sense of seeing the physical thing when you open up a chest. And I think that's one of the things that's unlike what other people are doing. And again, it's not a matter of right or wrong. Lots of looter shooters out there at this point that do an amazing job. Like Bungie's done an amazing job with Destiny. I love Destiny, but I would say opening up a chest is a unique experience when it comes to Gearbox games.
And it's so balanced, because sometimes I get this weapon in the game and I'm like, oh man, this game is so cool. I'm not going to change this weapon for the entirety of the game. And 10 minutes later, like, oh, damn, this weapon is better than this. And I'm constantly changing my inventory. And so this addiction is like always there with the color. And kudos to Mark Petty. I had Mark Petty, audio director at Gearbox, on the podcast, and his entire team are doing fantastic job designing like different parts of weapons in the game. So yeah, and the audio wise, the game is rewarding as well.
Oh yeah, it's not just looking at all the special art. I mean, our audio department is second to none. Like they take their job so seriously, and they love crafting all the different types of sounds as well.
Yeah. So speaking of audio, aside from games, you also make music under the band name Wonderblind. Yeah. So awesome name, by the way. So what is this band about, and what kind of music do you make? Well, I know about it, but I'm asking for listeners. Yeah.
Sure. So I loved the music of the 90s. Like I kind of grew up on the music of 90s rock and alternative. And so I think a lot of that influences how I write music. And I've been in several bands before, but Wondermind in particular was just something I started when I moved to Texas to work at Gearbox. Actually, 5 of the Wondermind songs are in Borderlands 3,
wow. Yeah.
Like on the radios that you find all around the map that you can just listen to. It's like modern rock. Like if you like just general alternative or modern rock, you should definitely give Wondermind a listen. But it's kind of a side project that I do. It's not a band. It's like all me. So I do all the instruments and do all the mixing and whatnot. So, and I actually have other stuff coming out this year. So I actually found some more time to make some new stuff.
Yeah, great. For people who are curious, they can find you on Spotify, YouTube, and every major music streaming services, right?
That's right.
Great. So let's talk about your favorites. So what are some of your favorite video games of all time?
Man. So I go back and forth between A Link to the Past and Breath of the Wild. Like A Link to the Past and Breath of the Wild, I think for me were watershed moments for the Zelda franchise. I'm a Nintendo nerd. Like I've grown up on Zelda, Mario, and Metroid. Like that's the heart and soul of everything that I love. So Mario Odyssey, I've already mentioned before, is like the pinnacle of platformers to me. Breath of the Wild it's just an amazing open world experience. Shadow of the Colossus is probably one of my biggest. I loved Shadow of the Colossus. I love boss battles. Boss battles are like one of my favorite things to do in any video game ever, right? Like,
and you designed some of bosses in Borderlands 3, right?
Yeah, I did the Vault boss fight. So I did, Rampager. I did Troy fight. I did the final Tyrene fight, as well as Grave Ward, the big island monster fight. Yep. Yeah. So those, of all time, probably those.
What are some
of my favorites of all time?
What are some recent games that you played like changed your mind?
So I will say that typically, and again, there's no right or wrong, I'm not particularly a Souls fan. Just the uber punishing style is just not my speed, which is fine. But I will say that Elden Ring started to change my mind a little bit on Souls game. I think marrying a Souls-like with open world was a really great decision. I'm not ready to say it's like my favorite of all time, but it's really difficult. I don't know if there's anything that I've played recently that's like going to kind of knock some of those bigger experiences or those older experiences off the pedestal, so to speak. So, what have I actually played? Like, that's the thing. Like, I play an hour or two of everything, but it's very rare that I'll play something all the way to the end. Animal Crossing, though, on the Switch, I put in hundreds of hours into Animal Crossing on Switch. That was the last time. Of course, that also came like at a really important time during the pandemic where everybody got to go home.
Exactly.
And then it's like, what do we do? It's like, hey, Animal Crossing is here. And so I think I dumped a ton of time into that. But Elden Ring is interesting. I loved God of War a few years ago. So Ragnarok is coming up very soon. So I have my eyes very fixed on God of War Ragnarok. I'm about 5 hours into the new Horizon. I like the Horizon games, but I don't know. There's something about some of the older experiences where it's all about the core experience and the actual boss fight or the very focused narrative. Like sometimes I think when you go open world, there's just a lot of activities that you can do. And I think my play style, I can get it's not that I get overwhelmed really quickly. It's just I need that core reason to push through. And so if you can't capture that core loop fun in the first hour or two and really set the stakes that I care enough to do all of these wide variety of things, I tend to not stick with it. But at the same time, I also have 2 kids and I work on video games all day. So ever since I had kids, my time to play is also limited. So I'm just choosier these days on what I play.
Yeah. So we mentioned about bosses. What are some key points about designing a boss? What makes a good boss fight?
I think 2 key things for me that create a good boss fight is that it challenges you to use new mechanics that you have just learned in the level before or the region before. So the region is showing you like smaller enemies that make you use a certain ability that you're just learning or a new item that you have learned to use. Like, Metroid and Zelda do these very, very well. And so by the time you get to the boss, like they're doing certain actions or things that you're like, oh, I need to use that item. But on top of that, it's not just making you use the thing you just learned, but it's also pushing you to play in a different way. So if you have a bunch of enemies that you've learned to attack one way, you still have a slight puzzle element to, it's not just a big, a big wall that I'm just like constantly shooting at and the health bar goes down. There are mechanics that you still have to learn within the fight, but you can draw on the mechanics that you have learned to use leading up to that boss fight, if that makes sense.
Wow, that's a great point, actually. Yeah. So let's talk about movies. I don't know how. Do you find time to watch movies? What are some of your favorite movies of all time? I want to.
Oh, all time.
Yeah.
Well, I just saw Top Gun Maverick. I think Top Gun Maverick is probably one of the best like old school soul blockbusters that I've seen in a long time. Like we're very used to all the Marvel movies and how they've really overtaken what the blockbuster means. And I love the MCU movies, but Top Gun Maverick was fantastic. Matrix was a watershed moment for me. The original Matrix like blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind for sci-fi that you're constantly guessing. M. Night Shyamalan's Sixth Sense also blew my mind, just as a different way to do mainstream horror or mainstream thriller. And nobody liked The Village, from M. Night Shyamalan, but I loved The Village. Critics hated it. I thought The Village was one of my favorite Shyamalan movies for a variety of reasons. Back to the Future is a classic. Like it's going to my childhood. Like so many of my favorite movies of all time really are etched in my childhood. But I would say other than that, Hot Fuzz is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I know every single line from that movie, and anytime I watch it, I still laugh. My wife and I love Hot Fuzz. And then Waiting for Guffman and Spinal Tap, like the birth of the mockumentary, like the documentary style comedy that's like, is this real? Is this not? Those two, both This Is Spinal Tap and Waiting for Guffman are some of the funniest things in the world to me.
Yeah, that's great. So, that's it. Thank you so much for your time, Matt. And on behalf of Borderlands community, the fan community, and myself, thank you for taking care of this franchise and releasing an awesome and fun and different spin-off as Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. You're a great guy. Your work is inspiring, and I can't wait to play more games under your supervision, sir.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and we love our community. Thanks so much.
Yeah.